G'day. How are you guys? What's been happening in your life? Leave a comment below. Love to hear what's been going on. Here in Australia, it's winter time. So if you're an Aussie watcher, let me know how your winter's going. If you're on the other hemisphere, how are you enjoying your summer? Beautiful time to be connecting as we are on the precipice points of changing back into the other side of the cycle, which is so beautiful. Now that kind of cascade can lead me into the big question that we're going to be diving into today. All right, this is how to activate your DNA to answer your soul's mission. So this is a question that once I learned upon soul mission and all of these deeper spiritual topics or paths that we are alluded to in the collective consciousness, I started to wonder how this obviously all may unfold and transpire at an individual level, because obviously there's a macrocosm and a microcosm, and when we're looking at the DNA, we're looking at our own internal microcosm that creates what we are in this reality, in this flesh mobile, or whatever you'd like to call it in the third dimension. So that all being said, I want to try to, g'day from the ancestors. I want to just jump straight into it and just say how it is. And if you have any questions or queries along the way, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll get back to them in due course. All right, so this here, to activate your DNA, I'm going to go into then my personal journey with this as well, to just show where this has all come from, to answer a bigger question that, we are all from the same DNA. And that is something that I'm going to start to go into in the next video. But for this one, I'm going to just talk about the activating process and then what questions have been answered in my own life through this activation process of my DNA. So this can be done for anybody. All right, so in order to activate your DNA, you have to start to become clear with your awareness or your consciousness or your thought. So you need to be able to hold a thought or concentration on a particular idea for a little bit of time. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to activate your DNA. So you really just need to learn how to sit and be still with your thoughts, to concentrate on the nothingness. Because at the end of the day, if I just sit here and I can just be as still as the birds and not speak, and just breathe with the wind, right? It's all possible. We can just sit here and just... So when we train this enough, when we open our pineal glands, connect into our third eye, we get to start to actually utilize the whole formation of what it means to be an energetical being. So just a little bit of information on how all of this kind of operates. So we have our physical body, right? And that's the feedback loop of the universe in the third dimension. So whether or not we're being a clear conduit for that energy, or we're being sticky and stagnant and we kind of build it all up, is basically on our own accord, on how we act and function out through our day-to-day life, on our choices. How I breathe, am I connected to it? How I read a book, how I hold a phone, how I pick up a hammer, how I use an axe. If I become present in all of these activities and connect with my breath the whole way through the day and master it, and not get stray of thoughts and lose this sense of oneness, being with the moment, you can truly train this as a muscle to just be there and come from ultimately the astral plane always. And so that is what happens when you just come back to dedicating time with the breath. So first and foremost, to activating your DNA, you need to become clear with your own breath. You need to be able to control your breath. You need to be able to breathe in for a long time and draw out the kundalini and breathe in the yogic way. That needs to be a full baseline in order to really start to be in the full effect. But in order to then start to draw that energy up, you need to be able to sit properly on the ground. So you have to be able to be grounded. So learning to actually sit on the earth properly so you are grounded. So you then can start to breathe and just be with the oneness and let all that energy like drown out to Mother Earth. Our perineum and our feet are like negative poles of the human body. When we connect those to the ground, all of this energy can drain out away from the body, and then we can become clear. So once we let all this energy drain out and we can just be a still vessel, we can then start to be with the oneness to then see what we truly are. And so then to the next step of activating the DNA is, so from the physical body, after we let all this go, there might be something stored in that energy body, or like that, the emotional body that, something might have hurt me and affected me when I was 6 years old and I've held on to it. Something might have affected me when I was 22 and I've held on to it. There might necessarily be a very big physical ailment that takes place with that emotion, but unless we truly go into that emotion, unless we truly tap into that energy in that emotional body to alchemize it, so we then can truly elevate our soul through the external outwards experience by going in and connecting with the true depth of our own heart, that then our breath allows us to control that pulsing and the oxygen flow to our bloodstream or the rivers of our own body. So once we start to then really move all of this, now a really good way that I've found to really cleanse out my energy body is, women, you have a beautiful womb space. Obviously here, men, we are connected via our umbilical cord here to our mother. Now often a lot of those kind of birthing period stages happen, and cuts happen very quickly. Like the mother and child get cut off very quickly. And so that is the first pain that baby's really experiencing in its physical form. Like, yes, it does have this sense of coming into the physical world, but if we do that process seamlessly, then no, not much trauma can be just bestowed onto the child through that process. We can, as parents, we can act as seamless conduits. However, that process of really cutting that umbilical cord can store a lot of trauma in this like abdomen area. And so sometimes, even if you don't feel like this area, might be tight, if you actually sit with and try to breathe into your abdomen muscles, often they're very tight. And it mightn't be because you've been working out or any of those, things of doing. It truly just might be from one of those energetical things. Now, we know that the body keeps the score. There's so many incredible authors and books written out there on what this actually does, the science of all of this. I've mentioned Dr. Joe Dispenza before because I've read his books. Wim Hof through breath alchemy and activating the dragon within. All of these incredible, souls that have been out there leading this vibration. These older dudes that have been holding it down. So then, some young fellas can come through and actually start to embody it from a younger age, and we can start to change how we live in society. And so by connecting to your breath, by understanding that there is this emotional body that does hold trauma, and no, we aren't to get caught up on it. So if we keep dwelling on our shit and keep living it and not actually move it and cleanse it and allow it to drain away, then yeah, we would just live in a cycle based on our own sorrows and traumas that we've bestowed onto ourselves. But if we actually just look it in the eyes and let it go to the fire, just sit there and burn it, let it sit with the ancestors, speak with it, be accountable, let it all go. Sit, be grounded with Mother Earth, let her surrender. When I went to India, staring at the Himalayas, they say, takes away all your sin. Now, they're huge mountains that just have incredible turbulent weather all the time and never change. And Australia's mountains aren't as big, but the windstorms that hit the trees and the mountains, and they move and shake, but they don't break. And like all this analogy of nature, to really let it go, to become strong in your own sense of truth and oneness, to let all what trauma has been held in the body, we can let all that go. And so once that happens, you really get to enter into the astral realm. But if you're having trouble, this womb space here, connecting to it, you can form a mudra around or connect your hands here in meditation, and then drop all your shoulders and be really rooted in the ground. And if your pelvis is a bit tight, and a lot of men's pelvis is tight, like, you know, we weren't really encouraged. A lot of men weren't encouraged to dance as a young boy, or like, you know, get taught like the dreaming songs of your tribe and things like this that actually allow the pelvis to be a breathing part of the human body, opposed to this area that just stores all this tension for us. So by sitting and just actually draining out, we can get movement back into our pelvis. And so if you need to put a block or a blanket or something just to bring your pelvis up so you can sit tall, and just start to breathe and be conscious into that womb space, form a mudra, and just breathe love and light into that area, and just sit with it. Just sit with, you know, what it would have been like to be birthed for the first time as a baby. Like, that was your memory, so it's yours to own. Go back to that space. And so once you do all of this, you can come into this like sense of oneness, into the astral. And it's an incredible, beautiful place where you can ask questions. And whether or not those questions are, you know, part of your higher timeline or not, will depend whether or not they're answered in accordance to your vibration or not. That's just kind of how I've come to know what that space really kind of entails, just at a surface level structure. But by sitting into this space, we can really become clear with what our own DNA looks like. So once we clear all that trauma of like understanding that we were, you know, weren't something, and then we were birthed into this world, and then we've grown, and we actually own that as something that we've been through as humans, not just like, oh yeah, now I'm 28 and this is me. I'm like, but actually own what it means to be like, you know, still be that baby, and then still be that 6-year-old, and still be that 12-year-old and that 18-year-old, and just keep in check with all of these beautiful markers of time. And this is what, by being, you know, intergenerational in tribal, allows you to still be reflective of when you were a young, you know, baby, because you're helping raise the babies of, you know, the tribe. And all of these mentalities that we are starting to adopt at a more conscious collective level are really rooted in understanding and keeping yourself in check along your soul's journey in this incarnation as a human. And so once I've done that for myself, it really allowed me to cleanse out and see from fresh eyes when I look back in my actual third dimensional history. You know, I don't have trauma and shit. Like, not to say that I haven't had my fair share of family shit along the way. Dude, no one's families is perfect, all right? Like that's the whole point of where we are now, is we get to embody the change. We get to become the evolution of what our ancestors have struggled for, so we can finally be in a position to, you know, not to live out the truth of what we are here to be. And so when I've looked back at my own DNA, this has been a fabulous journey that's been embarked by, you know, not just me. I've been fortunate that my grandmother's been taken a lot of interest in this in her later years of life, and a lot of that information has been passed on to me, and then I've had to, you know, decipher it in certain manners because of certain shames that come with the kind of the like breeding regime that was that occurred here in Australia through the stolen generation. Now, this is obviously an area that's like it caused a lot of trauma into the collective, and so it has been through this reclamation of my own DNA, because I've come from that process and you know, come from mixing blood, so to speak. That I've needed to look at this without holding any shame. And this is where I was talking about the energetical body, because if that energetical body is being passed down from your ancestry opposed from yourself, and in that, it's that astral plane, that you need to own it, because it's actually not yours in this lifetime, but it's one of your ancestors, and they felt shame from being, you know, a half caste or a label that's been put onto them to like put their self-worth down. That has then been passed on to you. And so it's through this sense of activating your own DNA that you can, you know, walk by your ancestors again and look them and be the man that they needed when they were getting fucking bullied at school for, you know, being whoever they were, or being, you know, that's how we can really start to be this. You get to do that for yourself, and then because it's your blood and you can go back through that process, you can then do that at every single stage of your generations. Now, for me and my lineage, I come from like my father's side is like McCann, right? And that name is very heavily orientated to the Irish. Now, there was a wives' tale because my families have both my dad's and my mum's side had been in the Gambanga country area for a very long time as white peoples, and then also the aspects that obviously are indigenous to that land as well. So it's through understanding what this means. Now, I mentioned in my last video about like 5 generations of farming. Now, this is the next thing. So this McCann thing actually comes from something called Mac of Kenna, which is the son of the wolfhound or wolfhound of Kenna. And this is actually part of like the British Isles as we know it today, but there's 2 distinctions there of the Kenna area and then the like Duffys and the McDuffs, which is actually where Tamsin's family is from. And so she's going to record her own video around this stuff, because when we look back at our DNA as individuals and then how our souls have now come together, there's this sense of we were in the same British Isles area from our DNA, and we were both part of this the true royal regime of that area, of the bloodlines of there, before the British Empire invaded and started to cut down even the clans of the British Isles. So this is some of the depth that you can start to tap into. Now, through this study of my surname right now, which is based on my father. But in the indigenous way, a lot of your family's history obviously goes off your mother because you're in that womb space. So I'm just looking at my father's side now, just to sit in with the current societal narrative of like last name, and then I'll go into the other sides of what's made me, and then where I found senses of freedom and reclamation in my own DNA. So then when I started to look back into India, right, about this sin thing I just said, when we flew back from India, Tamsin just randomly booked an Airbnb in Sydney, and when we walked in, we got off the plane, got into this Airbnb, and then we were there, got in late at night. And then in the morning, we woke up and Tamsin saw this very small family plaque, and it was a McCann family plaque. And the gentleman that owned this Airbnb was a McCann. And I saw what the photo was, and I've looked into it before of family crest and all this symbology. But I was really eyeing it up this time around, and I was I noticed the synchronicity of wow, what does that truly mean? And after I started to look into where the McCann lineage comes from, there is, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but I'll put a screenshot up, and he has basically been able to go back that McCanns, or the Kenner line, were one of the original bloodlines that had come from, in the Old Testament, one of the I think 12 families from Cain and Abel that were kicked out of the Holy Lands to then go set up elsewhere in the world. And so it's at that point that I was like, wow, okay, so then what do they mean by this Holy Land from this side of the story? Because there has to be a world. We know that there's this bigger, greater world truth coming out. And so I've always been using my own DNA and my own story to then, where do I slot in to see my individual soul mission in the greater sense of purpose of life right now, to act as a collective consciousness, to embody what the information of the quantum physics is truly meaning. And then as an individual, how do you take the rigor, the steps every single day to then embody what it truly means to be, a quantum field of your entire DNA sequence and structure. And so once then I got back to this, all right, so the stories of the Irish and the Scottish and the Welsh tribes say that they came from an ancient culture race that were white-skinned and blue-eyed from this land, and they were very strong fighters. They had tattoos. They were very noble people, and these were the culture heroes of these Kenner relatives of my blood lineage. So that obviously is where I got to, is back to the Old Testament in my own family, and I was like, fuck, all right, that's pretty cool. I went to a private school, right? And so for me, Christianity was really, has really been posed from the British narrative to really own the New Testament and to really own that and hold that as a gatekeeping knowledge. Now, we obviously know that the monarch and the British church is the remnants of the Roman Empire and so on and so forth. So we know that this empire is really coming to an end, and this is some of what they were up to. So we have a book, and I'll put a segment of me reading this chapter in. And this book says that the British Crown knew that the Indigenous Australian peoples of Australia are the land stock race of the star peoples that are here, and if they wanted to basically breed and preserve their blood lineage, or to try to create something or a new race, they should come here and breed with the original stock race of the entire world. So this is a book that was held in one of the Freemasons lodges in our local area that then came into our possession, and basically showcases that the British monarch had well and truly all the knowledge to know that what they were doing was fundamentally, number one, wrong, that the Indigenous Australians were in fact entirely the first peoples of the planets and represent a vibrational frequency of those entire First Nations people. And from that space, we now start to see how this global narrative of Australia being the true motherland of all peoples, of all blood lineage is coming from, because even when we start to look at the vibrational frequencies, they say that the Gaelic language is syntax perfect. Now, when you start to understand vibrational frequencies and what that then means in the quantum realm, and then start to apply that knowledge into the languages that we actually truly speak, and then I'm at a point now where I'm starting to study the indigenous tongues of my lands where I was born, and then also the lands that I grow up on, albeit having very, similarities along the way. His spirit right now with the wind. They have subtle changes and nuances along the way, and it's a very incredible journey to see how sophisticated the indigenous tongues are based on the syntaxes and vibrational frequencies that the human consciousness and the universe resonate at. It's absolutely true magic, entirely what it is. So we know that we have this sense of spelling or words and vibration frequencies, and they are the spells of what we say. And so when we start to see these songs, and these is what the indigenous peoples of Australia really hold down, are these vibrational songs. So when I started to then tap into my maternal songline, or my mother, this is where the whole sense of the story of what the first settlers and the traditional British invasion story of Australia has said, and what the actual truth is, and then where the shame has shown up in families and so on and so forth. Now, the long and the short of it is, my maternal side has been based in Gumbaynggirr country for as far back as I can look, and has been told and known through the ancestors, through grandparents, through documentation of my great-great-great-great-great-grandparents. And so my, I think, fifth great uncle or something, or sixth great uncle, his name was Horace. And he, yes, his name was Horace. And he was the first white fella. And in my family documents, this is underlined and highlighted as first white fella born on the Arara, or the upper Arara River. Now, that alone in of itself puts my family, I think, in the area back to like the early 1800s. And then my McCann line, also my father's line, had been in the same area only 50 years later. I think in the 1850s, they came to the Gambanga area. And so now that we start to know that all the blood came from here in Australia, that's why we start to see that Australia is such a multicultural place, because all of these souls are having this returning to the motherland of where we have all come from. And so the indigenous yarn attached to the blood lineage coming here is in fact where we are right now in the cycles, which is so beautiful. So when I look back, my grandmother, and I have to really quote her for this because she really put into this. Now, she's documented all of this. She's said to me and showed me a photo of my great-grandfather, and she has a lot of shame around her dad because he basically got my great-grandmother pregnant, but was an indigenous fella of Coffs Harbour, or of Gambanga country. And he could read tea leaves and was basically entirely in connection with all the stars and everything of that nature. And she told me that, and I was like, wow. And so when I started to go through all my DNA and then understand how I can tap into the astral, I can go back to my great-grandfather, albeit I was shown a photo of him, and I have seen one photo. So I can use that photo and tap into the astral, activate my DNA, and then use whatever information he has there to then teach me as a man in today's day and age. So this is how we start to use our ancestry, the astral, to then teach us in the wholeness now to then become what we are truly here. And so then when we then keep going back in the indigenous yarn, obviously now in the collective narrative, it's coming out that we come from the stars. Now, what does that all truly mean? Now, at the minute, I've just gone through a deep sense of spiritual container and ritual just because of the solstice and my birthday, as I mentioned in my last video. And through that, the lyrebirds have been teaching the young men all of the songs and all the vibrational outputs that are of the bush, or of the feather, like of the bird dreamings. And so if you're not from Australia, or if you're from Australia, you're not familiar with lyrebirds, because they are very rare, albeit I see them very, very frequently, because there's a lot of them in our property, which is just beautiful to have as a frequency, and we all hear them, playing based on where we are and all of these beautiful things, and singing the songs. And so when we look at the lyrebird and holding down, I won't go on into this too much, but they basically know, or they can repeat the vibrational frequencies of all the birds of the forest. And they learn these vibrations. They can just output them. And there's a book that was written of a lyrebird in Victoria. And this was a woman, or like a hermit woman, who lived out in the bushes, and there was a lyre that would visit her and literally cured her of sickness, of ailments, of all of these things because of the songs that this lyrebird could sing. And so when we then take that story of right now and we turn from what is Earth and look back up to the stars to see the macro and the micro come together, the lyrebird teach their young the songs over the winter times, and they practice, and you can hear the juvenile ones practicing during winter time to get all these vibrations. Our one kind of struggles, and its whipbird isn't really strong, and it's just started to work on its kookaburra, and like all the time we hear it, it's like pure true beauty and magic to hear this bird just like resonate at these outputs. It's absolutely incredible, and that's why it's called this lyre. And so basically we see these the lyre teach their song in wintertime. And so when we look up into the stars and we see what constellations are visible in the wintertime to reflect where we are now. And now the Lyra constellation is entirely visible in the months of June, July and August, the months of winter. And it's in the northern sky, and it's about a 30-degree angle up, I would suggest. Just right now, just off the top of my head. And this constellation is connected to the lyrebird, and this is where the DNA of the lyre or the lyrans, and the lyrans are an extraterrestrial race or part of our galactic family, and they are they're really old. They are also attributed to having some of the original DNA for our Pleiadians, the star families as well. And so the lyran DNA is this blue kind of bird, very strong energy, very staunch energy. And so this is the starting to connect between how the vibrational frequency of our language as well, of what tongues we speak, of what tongues our families have spoken, along the way to activate and sing the song to resonate our DNA once again. And so we really see this in the lyrebird, because they can sing songs of birds that have been extinct. That's another one of the stories in that book I referenced, that this bird also was singing songs of ancient birds that have been taught to it from prehistoric times, like really crazy stuff that are holding down these vibrations of where the DNA of the bird fits in the human experience now, because we are the culmination of something that is absolutely so sublime. And now, as this collective is having a reckonance of this pure divinity of the creation of each individual that walks upon this planet. All right. Oh, all right. So that's just one of those pieces, right? So even the Pleiadians, even the DNA of our Pleiadians that are an old star civilization that are very on the forefront of it, even their DNA has had another source in our universe. So we are being one another. We are the creation, the culmination of one another simultaneously. We're not here to be different or to be separate. Information, blood is here to be shared, to be spilt in positivity, not over animosity. The blood should be spilt in love-making, not in fighting war. And so this is truly where we are at. We should be creating beautiful blood. We should be looking at our own blood to activate our souls, to find purpose in where we are, because by activating my DNA, by knowing that on my dad's side, that my dad being a farmer, and then my dad's, family being part of an ancient line of farming from the Old Testament, that now simultaneously there's been farmers on my maternal side for generation as well, that then I get to live out the culmination to be able to use all of that farming knowledge, the good and the bad, the organic and the non-organic, and synthesize it all to then become the best farmer that I can be for my family to survive. Like how incredible is that for me to know that when I'm having a bad day with a chip and hoe, all those generations ago, there was another one of me out on the land working hard for my family. Like, that gives me strength and power. That gives me something to be proud of. That allows me to stand here with my fucking heart strong and almighty, okay? So it's not about being egotistical. It's not about trying to see that, I'm a god and this and that. We are all pure divinity. We all come from, even the Pleiadians are coming from the lyran DNA that then also is simultaneously shared with some of the peoples here in Australia as well, of that pureness of the lyran DNA. And there's a pureness of the Pleiadian DNA that resonates through. And we see this in the formulations of the human body, because how adaptable this form is, this vessel that we all come in and different, that is the beauty that is to be celebrated. We shan't fight over it anymore, because each human has this divinity and this wholeness, this star seed activated that sits in the astral realm, already activated. Whether or not you embody it is whether or not you connect with that plane. And I hope that in this video, through my own examples, through being really intimate and sharing my stories and speaking into the, areas that I've had to alchemize shame for, and then own as truth and say, and, then go through my own spiritual awakenings and initiations with spirit, with country, with ancestor, to then be here to sit, as the clearest conduit I can, to just show how we can move forward from understanding that. And I'll go into more detail as I go through and share more stories and yarns along the way, and get into more of the nitty gritty as, we reflect, and the collective's ready for it, of course. That's what I'm here to do. That's what I have. That's what my soul mission is. It's what the Pleiadians have entailed me to do. This is what this video is, from a whole, complete, hearted place to vibrate out the resonance frequency that every single human shares its divinity with one another, and that is with the stars. And our star family shouldn't be something that we should be afraid of. We should be embracing them as the true forefathers, as what they really are, as they are our ancestors. All right. Thank you so much.